Okay. Does everybody see my screen? A taste of
Yes.
Yeah,
Talmud?
yeah.
Okay. So we're just going to start with a quick review of last week where we talked about the sort of transmission of the oral Torah, some historical context of how the Mishnah came to be, how the Gemara came to be, some of the categories of rabbis that we
Hmm,
find in the Mishnah and in the Gemara.
hmm.
So I just want to frame before we actually jump into the Mishnah, which we will do, just to put it once again into context. So this was last week. We'll do the bracha in a minute. So, right, so the Talmud, of course, is essentially the marriage of the Mishnah and the Gemara, and serves as a guide to Jewish law.
Make the Talmud, yeah.
Um, the Mishnah, a foundational text of Jewish law, compiled by Rabbi Yehuda
And to
HaNasi
see.
around the year 200. And of course, he didn't author everything in the Mishnah. I'd say he was the principal editor
Hmm.
and the principal compiler. And again, this was met with enormous backlash. This was a sort of revolutionary idea to codify text that until then, for millennia, had been transmitted orally, passed down through generations verbally. And he saw that there was a need that we were once again being exiled, once again being expelled, once again the temple destroyed. And out of the fear of these teachings being lost, he saw that really the need uh, to preserve all of these amazing teachings. And of course, the Mishnah eventually gained universal acceptance,
Talmud.
and to date is a central work in Jewish religious thought and practice. Then we looked at this Mishnah, which comes from Pirkei Avot, which is the last section of the Mishnah. And I chose this Mishnah because it really illustrates the transmission of the oral Torah. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moshe receives the Torah at Mount Sinai, transmits it to Joshua, and then on down the line, Joshua to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets transmitted it to the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, which we talked about briefly, were the General Assembly of rabbis and scholars that I think 120 rabbis that really comprised the Jewish leaders of the day. They were the superior court. They were, basically in charge. And the Mishnah ends with an interesting thought that they said three things. Out of all of this transmission, they say three things. Heve mitunim badin, be patient with, rendering justice. Hemidu talmidim harbe, establish many students. Va'asu siag la Torah, and make a fence around the Torah.
Yeah.
And we sort of spoke about that juxtaposition of having a lot of students, but also making a fence, and perhaps having a lot of students creates that fence if you teach them properly.
I don't understand that.
I'm sorry?
I don't understand that. The fence.
The
Oh, we did that.
fence. So the fence really, I think that we all agreed that illustrates a need to be protective, to be protective of our Torah and of our teaching, and to make sure that when you teach students, that you teach them accurately. If not, things get distorted. I think more than ever, we're in a time of distortion, distortion of truth and of facts. I'm not just talking about in the Jewish world, but certainly in the Jewish world. I officiated the funeral today of a Holocaust survivor, and the Holocaust is one area where I mean things just get distorted completely to the point where there's Holocaust deniers.
Hmm.
Um,
Adam,
so,
for me, the,
yep.
the fence, I think, served two purposes for me. I was thinking about it last week. after our session. And I think the fences keep people out and they also keep people in,
Feeling.
Ah,
right? So I think so it's a dual purpose, one of not diluting the Torah and keeping it the rituals, keeping the practices, but also has the purpose of keeping the Jewish people together inside. I was thinking how that could be taken to an extreme, and how you have people in the Haredi community who feel almost imprisoned, right? And they're too much on the inside. So it's the fence has I think the two purposes to protect from outside and also to keep you inside. Yeah.
what a great thought. Thank you, Roger.
Mhm.
So true. Then we spoke about the Gemara, how it's really a commentary and discussion and debate on the Mishnah. And there's two types of Gemara. There's the Babylonian Talmud, which is of course from Babylonia, and this is the more widespread Talmud, the more studied Talmud to the point where if you say you're gonna offer a class in Talmud, the assumption is that it's the Talmud Bavli, but that's not to belittle the Talmud Yerushalmi, which was compiled in the land of Israel, but it is generally less studied. If we get far enough today, Rashi actually quotes the Jerusalem Talmud on our first Mishnah. Um, then we talked about the sort of generations of rabbis, and there is this sort of hierarchical status where after the Anshe Knesset Hagdola, the group of rabbis that are called Tanaim, um, and they were the authors of the Mishnah. When we talk about the rabbis from the Mishnah, they all come from this group of rabbis from the generation that's called the Tanaim. Rabbi Akiva is probably the most famous Tana. After them came the Amoraim, primarily the personalities we will meet once we get to the Gemara part of the Talmud, which is always after the Mishnah. And then later on, the Savoraim, Geonim, these are, of course, later generations. The Rishonim, which we will also study through this class, Rashi being the uh, most famous Rishon commentator for sure, and of course the Achronim. Then we looked at the layout of the classic Gemara, which is called the Vilna edition, because of course it was first printed in Vilna. And the image is how it looks, with the Gemara, with the Mishnah and Gemara in the center column. Rashi is always to the right. Tosfot is always to the left, and with supplemental commentaries around. And of course, there's also footnotes, and most traditional Vilna edition Gemaras have many commentators also in the back, which we call the guys in the back. Then we talked about Rashi, lived in 1040 to 1105 in France. Definitely the primary commentator on Tanakh, on Talmud, and the most studied commentator. And I explained that Rashi's focus is on what we call pshat, which gets mistranslated as simple, right? From the word pashut means simple, but that's not the case at all. Rashi tends to focus on the literal meanings, what exactly the words teach us, which came out of a response to the way that learning happened was very midrashic until Rashi. It was all oral Torah, so it was heavy on legend and tales and that kind of thing. And Rashi really felt the need to provide a literal explanation of text, for which we are eternally grateful to him. Tosfot, I'd say, is the second most widely studied commentator, especially in the world of Talmud. It's not just one person, even though I only have one photo here. It's not just one person. Ba'alei Tosfot, they're called. And these were largely descendants of Rashi. Many of his grandsons, many of his students comprised the work of Tosfot. And that's really, oh, did I raise my hand? I do not have a question. Um, that's really where we left off last week, sort of a historical context. So this week, we're going to get to some good stuff. Okay, everybody see class 2? Taste of Talmud class 2?
Yes.
Okay. So, students of Talmud, you know what? I don't even think I said the word Talmud. Of course, is rooted in limud, in study. Studying Torah, studying Talmud is a mitzvah for which there is a bracha that we recite every day. So please join me if you haven't said it yet today. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, to engage, to make busy with words of Torah. Okay. Welcome to Masechet Brachot. So we talked about last week the sort of the structure of the Talmud, how there are 6 categories, and every category has what we call masechtot, tractates, volumes. If you had hard copies of all this, you would have an impressive library of volumes, of thousands and thousands of pages. Whomever has heard of Daf Yomi. So Daf Yomi is a Gemara initiative that came out of Lublin, and it is a worldwide phenomena that people study one page of Gemara a day. If you study one page a day, it'll take you 7 years to complete the entire volume of Talmud. And everyone in the world studies the same page every day. There's classes there. I mean, you could easily access this. It's on YouTube. Today had its own daf, its own page, and every 7 years there is a major celebration. Oh, I mean, there are, lots of them. The biggest one, I think, happens at Yankee Stadium. I mean, they like fill up these huge baseball stadium to celebrate the completion of the Talmud. So the Mishnah we looked at last week, Pirkei Avot, is from the last tractate of the Mishnah, and today we start at the beginning. Masechet Brachot. Of course, brachot are blessings, and it's the first tractate of the Talmud, focusing on the laws of blessings and prayers, which covers the proper recitation, and I would say in the proper times, of various blessings, including those before and after meals. The Shema. Shema is the one that we will take a look at tonight. The Amidah, and the significance of intention in prayer. It provides a foundational understanding of Jewish prayer, and I'll just add, which I didn't add on the footnote, in a legal context, right? Like we're always focused on what's the halacha here, and the first Mishnah, which we will look at in Brachot, discusses the timing for the recitation of the Shema in the evening. And of course, the Shema, I assume that we are all familiar with that prayer, and we all agree is a central prayer in Jewish liturgy, perhaps the most central prayer in Jewish liturgy. So I wanted to start by looking at the daf, at the page, and it's really a goal of mine to begin to get us familiar with the traditional page of the Gemara. So we have the full page on the right, and I zoomed in just to the Mishnah in the center. I am going to read the Mishnah. I'm going to translate it quickly as a general overview, and then we're going to go back and we're going to go piece by piece, line by line. I hope that's okay with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So before we begin, I want to learn Torah is a very holy endeavor. When you take the word Mishnah and you play a little game of Scrabble with it, you get the word neshama, which means soul.
Mm-hmm.
So to study Mishnah is linked
So,
to the soul. In that vein, I would like to offer tonight's learning to the merit that the hostages return home, that in the merit of our learning tonight, in whatever way is possible, in the Torah that we now put into the world, in the positivity that we put into the world, should have an effect, and the hostages should be released and come home. I also want to say that we should have in mind and we should say the names of people that are unwell that can use refuah shlema. Someone emailed me just before the class saying that she couldn't come. Her father's very sick. So ask Nachum ben Sarah is his name. So if anyone has someone that they would like to learn for, you can please say their names. In addition to a yort site, it is certainly a custom to learn to dedicate the learning of a Mishnah to someone's your site. We say that their neshama should have an aliyah, that their soul should have further ascension in heaven. So if there's anyone that would like to share, please share someone that you would like to learn for this evening, and we will certainly have them in mind. I'm not sure if anyone shared, but if you were on mute, we didn't hear.
Uh,
So
I I have Chaim Yisrael Ben Libi Nakama.
thank you, Chaya.
You're welcome.
So we begin. So again, I'm going to move quickly, but then we're going to start over slowly. Really, this is just a sense to get familiar with the page. Do you see my cursor?
yes.
Okay. Meimatai korin et shma. Oh, yeah. Meimatai korin et shma barvin. From when do we recite the Shema at night? משעה שהכהנים נכנסים לאכול בתרומתן, עד סוף השמורה הראשונה, דברי רבי אליעזר. So from when do we recite the Shema at night? Question. Answer. From
Okay.
the hour that the Kohanim, that the priests in the temple
Go to
enter to eat
eat.
their truma. So you don't have to know what that is, but I'll just say this week's Parsha is Parshat Truma.
That's so.
Ad,
Till
until
the end.
Sof HaShmura HaRishona, until the end of the first watch. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. So, Rabbi Eliezer says, from when do we recite the Shema at night? From the hour that the Kohanim enter the temple to eat of their truma until the end of the first watch. Again, we will take a look at truma. We will take a look at the first watch a bit. V'chachamim omrim ad chatzot, and the sages say until chatzot, which is midnight, not midnight like the way we think of midnight in terms of there's like 11:59 and then the next minute is midnight. We're talking about in halachic hours, which are called sha'ot zmaniyot in Hebrew. The daytime has 12 halachic hours, and the nighttime also has 12 halachic hours, which divide the day. And so that's why we have certain times that we can say certain prayers, and every day the time shifts slightly. So it's not sort of a perfect hour the way we think of it is 60 minutes. The time frame changes. Rabban Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Gamliel says, Ad sheya'aleh amud hashachar, until the dawn. So from when can you say the Shema until dawn? Maaseh, there was an incident. Uvau banav mi beit hamishte. And אמרו לו, לא קראנו את שמע, אמר להם, אם לא עלה עמוד השחר, חייבים אותם לקרות, ולא זו בלבד. Hold on, let me slow down, I'm reading too much. So there was a story. Rabban Gamliel's sons came back from the Beit HaMishteh, and that implies that they were at a wedding. And they said to him, we didn't recite the Shema yet. Rabban Gamliel said to them, if the dawn hasn't risen, chayavin otam likrot. If the dawn hasn't come yet, you're still chayav, you're still obligated to recite the Shema. Velo zu bilvad. And not just in this case. Amru ela kol ma she'amru chachamim ad chatzot. Rather, every time it says that the Chachamim say ad chatzot until midnight, so any mitzvah he's saying that the Chachamim will say, that the sages will say, you're allowed to do until chatzot, the mitzvah ad sheya'aleh amut hashachar, really, you're allowed to do it until the dawn. Hekter chalavim ve'evarim, the burning of the fats and the limbs. And just briefly, so when sacrifices were brought to the temple, things were separated, and part of the temple service was they would burn the fats and the limbs from these sacrifices, and that could take all night. Mitzvatan ad she'eleh amud hashachar. The mitzvah of that, so the obligation of that was until the dawn. B'chol hanechalim liyom echad, and all the sacrifices that they were commanded to eat biyom echad, in the same day. Mitzvatan ad sheya'aleh amut hashachar. The mitzvah is actually, in fact, you're chayav, you are obligated till the dawn. Imkain, if so we're imkain, aleph kaf. Lama amru chachamim ad chatzot. If so, why do the sages say until chatzot, until midnight? If you're actually allowed to do it until the dawn, why do the chachamim say until chatzot? Answer: kedei laharchik adam min ha'avera, to distance a person from an avera, from a sin,
a wrongdoing.
So there's this idea: don't delay. Like, if you're gonna think that you could do it until dawn, so I'll push it off. But no, chatzot, you should really do it right away. So that's a helicopter view of the Mishnah. And now I'd like to go more slowly back to the beginning. Let's do Chazara, we call it, review. Do I have a volunteer to read it in the Hebrew? Sheila?
מאימתי קוראים את שמע בערבים, מסעה שהכהנים נכנסים לאכול, בתרומותיו, עד סוף האשמורה הראשונה, דברי רבי אליעזר.
So this is the first part of the Mishnah. Do I have a volunteer to read the English?
Mishnah, from when that is, from what time?
Volunteer to read the English, anyone?
From when that is?
There we go.
From what
Jeffrey,
time does one recite Shema in the evening? From the time when the priests enter to partake of their teruma. Until when does the time for the recitation of the evening Shema extend? Until the end of the first watch. The term used in the Torah to indicate the time for the recitation of the evening Shema is b'shokbecha, when you lie down, which refers to the time in which individuals go to sleep. Therefore, the time for the recitation of Shema is the first portion of the night, when individuals typically prepare for sleep. That is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer.
Thank you so much. So we're looking at the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. I'll just say, and I would like to thank and shout out Sefaria for the translation, and they do a wonderful job. So if you can see, some of the text is in bold. The bold part of the English is the literal translation of the Mishnah, and what is not bolded is sort of commentary. So they do really a fantastic job at both providing the literal translation, and then they sort of explain also what's going on. Um, before we move on, any questions? Right, we just heard the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay. Do I have another volunteer? Okay, I'll go. B'chachamim
חכמים
omrim.
אומרים
Yeah.
עד חצות.
Rabbi,
Okay, so how about this? How about Sheila does the Hebrew, Jeffrey does the English?
לא. וחכמים אומרים עד חצות.
who's
Okay.
that?
Okay, the rabbis say the time for the recitation of Shema is until midnight. Rabban Gamliel says one may recite Shema until dawn, indicating that B'shochvecha is to be understood as a reference to the entire time people sleep in their beds, the whole night.
So we have a little bit of a disagreement. Rabbi Eliezer says from the time that the Kohanim enter the temple to do their truma, to eat from their truma, which is in the first part of the night, and the sages say until midnight, and Rabban Gamliel is now saying until the dawn. And just we will actually look at this soon, but just spoiler alert, this whole idea comes from the Torah, from the Shema, that says uveshoch becha uvekumecha. We say the Shema at least twice a day, actually 3 times a day, which we will talk about later. But the commandment is to say the Shema beshoch becha when you lie down, uvekumecha, and when you arise. So Rabban Gamliel is saying you could do it until dawn, and so showing us that his opinion is really that what does the Torah mean by beshoch becha? It's to be understood as a reference to the entire time people sleep in their beds. So we can almost deduce from this, Rabbi Eliezer is saying, when is beshoch becha? That first part of the night when the Kohanim come to eat their truma. What does the Chachamim say is the time beshoch becha? Until midnight. Sheila, you want to continue in the Hebrew?
מעשה ובאו בניו מבית המשתה, אמרו לו, לא קרינו את שמה, אמר להם, אם לא עלה עמוד השחר, חייבים אתם לקרות. ולא, זו בלבד אמרו, אלא כל מה שאמרו החכמים עד חצות, מצוותיו עד שיעלה עמוד השחר.
Beautiful. Jeffrey?
The Mishnah relates that Rabban Gamliel practiced in accordance with his ruling. There was an incident where Rabban Gamliel's sons returned very late from a wedding hall. They said to him, as they had been preoccupied with celebrating with the groom and bride, we did not recite Shema. He said to them, if the dawn has not yet arrived, you are obligated to recite Shema. Since Rabban Gamliel's opinion disagreed with that of the rabbis, he explained to his sons that the rabbis actually agree with him, and that it is not only with regard to the halacha of the recitation of Shema, but rather wherever the sages say until midnight, the mitzvah may be performed until dawn.
Thank you so much. So for starters, do we all understand the 3 different points of view? Anyone have any questions about anyone's opinion? So so I'll just say, first of all, there's a concept here that happens all the time in the Mishnah. It happens all the time in the Gemara, where people bring something that happened almost as a proof, right? Again, rabbis argue their point, almost like in a court of law. So you bring source text, proof text, or case law, right? So I think lawyers can bring judgments from other cases that they argue are similar to this case, and almost to prove the ruling that they want for the case, they bring a similar ruling from a different case. So what happens with text, people, rabbis will bring psukim from the Torah that say, no, the Torah says this and this and this. That's why my opinion is right. Another way they do that is by what people actually did. So this is one of those times. Look, I know that Rabban Gamliel's sons came back from this wedding super late. They were partying with the Chatan and Kala, with the bride and groom. They came and they forgot to say Shema. And he allowed them, and he said, if it's not done, you're still obligated to recite the Shema. So that's a way that people try to prove a point. Like you're saying, I saw Rabbi Akiva do this, so of course we're allowed. Let's just finish the Mishnah. Sheila, you can continue with the Hebrew.
חלבים ואיברים, מצוותיו על שיעלה עמוד השחר וכל הנאכלים ליום אחד. מצוותיו עד שיעלה עמוד השחר. אם כן, למה אמרו חכמים עד חצות? כדי להרחיק אדם מן העבירה.
Beautiful. Jeffrey, can I impose again?
Rabban Gamliel cites several cases in support of his claim, such as the burning of fats and limbs on the altar. Due to the quantity of offerings each day, the priests were often unable to complete the burning of all of the fats and limbs, so they continued to be burned into the night, as it is written. This is the law of the burnt offering. The burnt offering shall remain upon the pyre on the altar all night until morning, while the fire on the altar burns it. And with regard to all sacrifices, such as the sin offerings and the guilt offerings that are eaten for one day and night, although the sages state that they may be eaten only until midnight by Torah law, they may be eaten until dawn. This is in accordance with the verse, on the day on which it is offered must you eat. Do not leave it until the morning. If so, why did the sages say that they may be eaten only until midnight? This is in order to distance a person from transgression, as if one believes that he has until dawn to perform the mitzvah, he might be negligent and postpone it until the opportunity to perform the mitzvah has passed.
Beautiful. So here we have another way that Rabban Gamliel is bringing his proof. He quotes psukim from the Torah, and teaches that any time that the sages say that we have a rule or a mitzvah that we're told can be performed until chatzot, until midnight. Again, midnight, the mid of the night in terms of halachic hours. We're actually obligated to do it until the dawn, and if we miss that marker of midnight, we're still allowed to fulfill the mitzvah until dawn. And then the Mishnah asks and answers, if so, why did the Chachamim say until Chatzot? If I'm actually allowed to do it until dawn,
why they say to midnight?
So they say to midnight, so you shouldn't delay. You shouldn't lose the opportunity for the mitzvah, and that risk that the time has passed.
That's sort of like not procrastinating. I still have time.
That's 100%. So there's a concept that's called zrizut. You should be quick with it. Don't delay.
Don't delay. Don't put it off.
Don't put it off.
So that's life.
I also like the parallel they make between the sacrifices on the altar and prayers, right? So you had to burn the fat and it would go on right late into the evening. So similarly, you can also say your prayer later on as well.
Mhm.
Of course, and that's an excellent point that you said, Roger, because today's prayer is yesterday's sacrifice, right? Like this came from a time period where we were evolving as a people, which I think you said last week as well, that we were really evolving as a people to that were centrally a temple religion, that the offerings happened in sacrificial form at the Beit HaMikdash. There were no synagogues.
Mhm.
There was no corner shtibel. To serve Hashem, you would bring a korban to the Beit HaMikdash. You would bring your sacrifice to the temple. And of course, we were now evolving into our own tefillot, our own prayers. So that's a very interesting reason that perhaps why it's linked here. That's great.
Mhm.
If I recall, Korban Pesach, the Passover offering, has to be eaten before midnight. It can't extend beyond to the dawn.
Well, that's right. So not all. So if we're commanded to eat it before midnight, then that command holds. The Mishnah just taught us any commandment that the Chachamim say until Chatzot.
Mhm.
In fact, you can fulfill until Alot HaShachar, until the dawn. Just as an aside, there's Pesach is very interesting this year as Erev Pesach is on Shabbos.
Yeah.
So very, very interesting. And actually, the shul, we were sort of wondering how to approach Shabbat morning in terms of Kiddush and Challah and Hamotzi and I mean, fascinating stuff
Mhm.
that really links again to the time period, the time frame that we're required to do certain mitzvot. So the challenge is since you're only allowed to eat chametz till a certain time of day on Erev Pesach, which will be well before 12:30, which is usually when we're saying hamotzi and shul, we were trying to think of how to tackle that obstacle. So we didn't really have an answer this morning, but I'm sure we will think of something creative. So let's just summarize in sort of bullet form. So we have opinions on timing of the recitation of the Shema. Rabbi Eliezer, from when the Kohanim are permitted to eat their truma, which is after nightfall. And and also he said that the latest time isn't until dawn, but until the end of the first watch, which is the first portion of the night, which we will examine in more detail soon. Rabbi Yoshua says until
Midnight.
Chatzot, and the Chachamim say until Alot HaShachar. Okay,
Ah,
so now I want to just do a little background. We're sort of covering these big concepts, and I think something that's a little daunting, at least for me, when you really get to learn Gemara specifically. The rabbis are on such a high level, right? That they throw out these things, truma and this korban and that, and there's almost an assumption that we're aware of all the surrounding halachot with all of these concepts and these sort of side tangents. So I just want to dive deeper on some of the things that we covered, and the first one is of course Shema. So we are currently in the time of night that we are obligated to recite the Shema. So it's a mitzvah. So if you haven't recited the Shema yet, please join me. Shema Yisrael
Israel, Adonai,
Adonai
Eloheinu,
Eloheinu
Adonai,
Adonai
Echad.
Echad. And the first paragraph. ואהבת את אדוני
אדוני
אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על המזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Beautiful. We were all just Yotze on the recitation of Shema in the night. So I'm just going to translate quickly. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem our God, Hashem Echad. God is one. I mean, we could have a whole series of classes just on this one pasuk. Of course, this is the Jewish, the like backbone of Judaism. We are a monotheistic religion. We believe in one God. God is oneness, a God that we can't see. And you shall love your God with all your heart, nafshecha, with
all your soul,
with all your soul.
Soul.
Sorry, I'm just going to mute people because when two people talk at once, it's a little hard to hear. Uvechol meodecha, and all your might. Vehayu advarim ha'ele, and these words that I command you, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, that I command you today, al levavecha, they should be on your heart. Veshinantam levanecha, you should teach your children, v'dibarta bam, and speak them, b'shiftecha beveitecha, when you're sitting at home, uvlechtecha baderech, or when you're sort of going on the way. And here are the two buzzwords of our Mishnah, uveshoch becha uvekumecha, when you lie down and when you arise. All right, it's these two words that we're sort of wrestling with. When does vishoch becha mean? Ukshartam leot al yadecha, and you should make a kesher, make a knot, make an attachment, leot, as a sign, al yadecha, on your hand. Of course, this we extrapolate the mitzvah of tefillin. V'hayu letotafot beinenecha, and another one between your eyes, right? So you have the hand tefillin and the head tefillin, and then uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha v'sharecha, and you should write them on the mezuzot of your house and of your gates. So again, we have the mitzvah of tefillin and of course mezuzah. And the other reference comes a few psukim later, a few sentences later. And again it says, so you should teach it to your children to speak these words. When you're sitting at home, when you're going on the way, when you lie down, and when you arise. So, in summary, the commandment to say the Shema twice a day, both in the morning and at night, is derived from the Torah, from those what we just saw. The two verses in Deuteronomy 6:7, you shall recite them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall teach your children, and again, when you lie down and when you rise up. So now I have a group question. We've entered the Mishnah, we understand the questions, we understand this sort of debate on the timing. And my question is a little more general. Why does the first Mishnah of the first Masechet, the first thing that was codified, why do we begin with the laws concerning the Shema? Out of 613 mitzvot, Why are we starting here?
Is it
That's
because
what
it's so
Hashem,
foundational? It's the foundation of everything to follow.
Hmm.
I don't know. The central pillar, what supports everything else.
That's a great answer.
That's what Hashem directed us.
He directed a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, what's the first mitzvah in the Torah? Right? Like if we're going to go in order, right? I mean, practically speaking,
Reshit bara Elohim Hashemayim v'et haaretz.
yeah,
No,
that's the first sentence. But what's
oh,
the first mitzvah? Who knows? Extra points.
listening
Reciting the
to
Shema?
Adam Stotland.
That is nowhere in the Torah.
That's
Reciting the Shema?
No, it is
No.
actually not reciting the Shema. That
Be
comes
fruitful
way
and
later.
multiply.
Is it a kashrut?
Yes,
True
I
or
heard
who?
it. I think it was Sky. Sky,
Yeah,
say it again.
true or who?
Be fruitful and multiply.
Exactly. Pru review. Pru urvu. Thank you, Sky and Jeffrey. So that's the first mitzvah in the Torah. Clearly, we're not starting there. What's the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people?
Is it that you should just have one God?
Nope. That's the
no.
first commandment from the Ten Commandments.
Oh, sorry.
Was it circumcision?
Nope. I'm sorry. The first mitzvah given to the Jewish people as a people.
Shabbat.
I'm sorry.
Shabbat.
Shabbat?
Nope.
Honor thy parents.
Nope.
No,
It's not the Ten Commandments, right?
The
Well.
first mitzvah was the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. The first mitzvah given to the Jews as a nation
When was that?
was HaChodesh Hazeh Tiyeh Lachem. It's for Nisan, for the month of Nisan, just before the Exodus. Hashem commands us to make the new month. It's a whole thing as perhaps as to why it was given, why that mitzvah was given as the first mitzvah to the Jews as a people.
When was that?
That was in
Good
Shmot. That was right before we left Egypt. So right before Sinai.
Exodus. Exodus.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have the exact chapter and verse offhand. I'm sure Rabbi Google can answer that question very easily. But again, it's not the first mitzvah that we're talking about in the Mishnah. The Shema is the first Mishnah. So far we have, Linda's answer, which is where my mind goes as well. Any other thoughts?
Could it be to kind of bracket the day? So it's one of the first mitzvot that you would do in the morning, and then it would be probably one of the last ones you would do in the evening, maybe?
Beautiful. So that's building on like Linda's answer as well. It's so foundational. It's b'shok b'cha. It's that we do it first thing in the day, almost the last thing at night. Beautiful. Why did they teach us the night one first? Why are we starting with nighttime? I would think most people fulfill the one in the morning first, right? Like it's why are we learning about the time we're allowed in the nighttime?
Is that
The
British?
day starts at night.
Do we fear death? Do we fear dying? And it has to be said, I don't know, in case we die before we wake. Is that?
Sure. So
No,
The
first
day
starts at night
actually
and then the
starts
first
at
day.
night.
In Breshit.
hold on one second. Let's just take turns. Sky said that the day actually starts at night. Excellent answer. Right, Jewish days start at night. Now is actually what day is it today? Today's actually Wednesday. Right now it's Wednesday. But I would still argue that most people say I would say out of the 100% of people who say the Shema at least once a day, most of them say it in the daytime Shema. but I mean, these are fantastic answers. I love the answer of sort of framing the day in the daytime and the nighttime.
Shirley wants to say something.
Shirley, go for it.
So it's also a very active thing. You're saying it, and at the same time as you're saying it, you're hearing it. So it's not passive. It's a very active um, doing. Plus, as you're saying it, and also it commands you to tell your children. Again, it's a very, very active, and it hopes that the generations will continue because it is the onus and responsibility of each individual to ensure that the generations continue by sharing the Shema.
Beautiful.
I
I
feel
mean, that's great.
for me that it brings God's presence. The Shema brings God's. So may I live my life with God's presence with me all the time. So the Shema is for me very important that way.
So Roger, I would say that's a support for why we should have learned the rules and the timings of the Shema in the daytime. When we're going to start our day, we're going to go out into the world and start our day. We should learn if it's so foundational, we should do it then, before we sort of enter the world.
But then I fell back on Sky's answer.
Yeah. So I mean,
Well, we start our holidays the night before, at night, because from what I understand is that in Breshit it was at night and then it was daytime.
Correct. So I would say, that's really how I think as well. And I would just go back to 1 second to just want to show, I want to go back to the source. Right? What's the commandment here? B'shoch becha uvekumecha. So which comes first?
When you lie down.
When you lie down. Right? It doesn't say bekumecha uveshoch becha, uveshoch becha uvekumecha. The Torah answers it for us. When you lie down
and then when you get up.
when you get up. So I think that's really almost it's like a simple answer. It's like, so of course we're going to start with the laws of the nighttime because that came first. That came first in the Torah, and of course that is also Sky's answer. Naomi, there was a great, Vayihi erev, Vayihi voker. First there was night. So beautiful. Any further comments or questions?
So I have a question. In some Sidurim, the Dalit on the end of Achad is larger. And people, when they daven it, they make an intentional Achad, like to really. So where does that come from?
So that comes from the Torah. So and again, this is all oral Torah. These are things that have been passed down orally as to why we do certain things certain ways. It also explains why Ashkenazim do things a little bit like this, and Sephardim do things because when things go orally, there's a little bit of that sort of broken telephone thing, and it's incredible to see how it's actually not broken at all, and it's just these slight different customs. But if you looked into the Torah, which I think our next slide, I think I have a shot of the Torah. You'll see not only is the Dalid enlarged, every Torah, when you get to that pasuk in the Torah, the Dalid is larger than the rest, and also the ayin. So I think I have it. I have the Shema. Um, I just used the picture as sort of to make the slide look good, but it'll serve a purpose. So this is how. So we see this.
Mm-hmm.
So the Shema. This is how it looks in the Torah, in Tefillin, in the mezuzah. The ayin is bigger, and when you get to the word echad, which is cut off, also the dalid. Um, if if we take the ayin and the dalid, what Hebrew word do we get?
Right.
Uh,
Odd.
And
More.
ad, so ad, but there's also a word
Id.
ed. So ed means witness.
Witness.
Oh, Adis. Adis.
You know, great. So edud in
Adud.
Jewish law is testimony.
Mm.
And ed means witness, and this is like we are the witnesses from Hashem, from Sinai. This is um our creed. This is our as like Linda said earlier. This is our foundational belief, right? And we are the witnesses to this, which is interesting because we also believe that you can't see God, but so the ayin and the dalit. Yes, Linda.
So I have a question. Is there any gratitude embedded in this? So, or some sense of inevitability as day follows night? I mean, it's inevitable day follows night, but the Shema is there. It's just part of this continuity. I don't.
I mean, I would say for sure. I mean, I don't think that we're looking at that in terms of, legal issues. That's more,
Yeah,
esoteric and like interpretation. Uh,
maybe a little mystical.
Miss for sure, for sure. And I would say 100% that's probably the reason that we're commanded to do it in the day and the night. And there's actually also a third time that we say Shema, which goes back to a comment that you had earlier, Linda, about a fear of death. We also say Shema. It's called Shema al hamita, Shema in bed. There is a bedtime Shema, which if we get to the Rashi, I think comments on that. And that's really b'shoch becha, like when we lie down. And I think that the really a big reason that we do that is because of this unknown that it's our hope and prayer that we wake up the next morning, and of course when we do, we jump out of bed, we say Modeh ani, I'm so grateful to have my soul back. When someone's in the hospital and we're told that that the end is near. And I'm talking about minutes or hours, not days and weeks, but so part of the vidui ceremony, part of that last confessional, I would say in English, which is customarily said if we're able to say it, knowing that a person is about to depart the world. Shema is part of that. You know, I mean, I don't know if you saw something that I will never forget, and if you saw the videos that came out from people's phones from the Nova Festival on October 7th, when they're running for their lives and they know that they're about to die, they say the Shema. And I'm talking about these are young kids that are partying, that I would guess are not the most observant, not the most, come from secular homes. And when they're facing down a gun and a terrorist, the Shema is on their lips. There's a very powerful documentary. I think I think I saw it on Crave. And it has a lot of raw footage. And it shows these people are hiding and they're shouting the Shema. It's like the most powerful thing I've seen. Countless stories of Jews being led to the gas chambers with Shema on their lips.
Yeah.
So I would say it 100% connects to, first of all, gratitude of life and of faith.
Does this idea of the martyrs saying it before they die come from this portion in the Talmud to say it before you go to bed and conceivably like lose your consciousness? Is that? Yeah. Okay.
B'shoch becha, for the final rest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's something in the chat. Laila Tov Boaz. Let's continue. If everyone's okay to go on for at least a few more minutes. The Shema, this is just something that I wrote. The Shema is one of the most fundamental and central prayers in Jewish tradition, expresses the core declaration of Jewish faith. And by beginning with the Shema, the Mishnah establishes the importance of prayer in daily life and also sets the tone for the rest of the Masechet, which deals with various blessings and prayers. And it's the connection also to Hashem and to the practice of mitzvot. Truma, another vast topic that the Mishnah sort of glosses over. Right, so this was Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. From when can we say the Shema? From the time that the Kohanim enter to eat of Truma. So what is Truma? It's actually this week's Torah portion. This was a portion of produce that was separated from the harvest and given to the Kohanim, considered sacred, and it was a way to support the Kohanim who were not involved in agricultural work. So when we entered the land of Israel, the land was divided in terms of tribes. What's the only tribe that did not receive a chelek, a portion in the land of Israel? The tribe of Levi, which of course comprised Leviim and Kohanim, as their role was to serve in the temple. So they didn't have land. So we as a nation and as a community supported the Kohanim through offerings. And the Truma is the first one. The Truma is the first. There are several mitzvot, several commandments that we are obligated to separate out of our harvest. There's the Bikurim, there's the Peyah, there's the Shichicha, and the Truma is the first one.
That's me. Give it to me, the Kohen.
Eli, it's all yours.
Yeah.
The Torah commands the giving of Truma to the Kohanim as a means of supporting them. It is mentioned in the Torah in several places, including in this week's Parsha. Amount, so typically it was 1/40 of a harvest.
That one out.
And the Kohanim, right, as opposed to Maser was a second one, which is 10%. And the Kohen must be ritually pure. They must be tahor. So if in some way they became tameh, they must purify themselves before they eat from the truma. The truma is given from the first portion of the harvest and cannot be given to a non-Kohen. And I think truma really represents a recognition of God's role in providing sustenance, and it is an expression of gratitude and acknowledgement that everything ultimately belongs to Hashem, and the Kohanim are tasked with performing the sacred duties of the Beit HaMikdash, and so they are supported through the Truma. Another group question, and perhaps maybe with this we'll end. Why does Rabbi Eliezer link the recitation of the Shema to the time when Kohanim eat Truma? So I'm having you guys over for dinner, right? Hey, Adam, what time is dinner? Well, dinner is going to be when I get home from shul. Does that answer your question?
No.
No. Is it 7? Is it 7:30? Is it 6:45? Right? And we're talking about a halachic time to say Shema. You know, if you come to my house a little early, you'll have a cocktail. A little late, you'll miss Kiddush, but you could say Kiddush on your own. Like that's casual. We're talking about the recitation of the Shema. We just spoke about how important the Shema is, the foundational of Jewish faith. Okay, so you're gonna say it when the Kohanim go to eat dinner. Vague.
Very vague.
So why do we think, we learned that the Mishnah is a codified book of Jewish law. Law needs to be exact. And if I'm commanded to say the Shema from a certain time until a certain time, then I need to know the exact time. And Rabbi Eliezer does not give the exact time. So why do we think he links the mitzvah of Shema to the eating of Truma?
Interesting.
It's a good question, no?
Good question.
No, I don't have an answer. No. Not even a direction.
I guess they ate their truma at a very specific time.
Actually, no.
No?
They were allowed to eat their truma. So let's say that the Kohen became ritually impure and they went to the mikvah and they would only become pure after nightfall, right? So it's not like an instantaneous, purity. They're pure for the next day. So you could say yes. So when they're allowed to eat the truma, it's pure, but it's still not it's still a vague way to answer the question. He's not saying until chatzot, right? Like that's an answer until the midway point of the night. Okay, every night we can calculate sha'ot zmaniyot, the halachic hours, and cut it in half, and that's the time, right? That's the sage's answer. That's the majority opinion. Anytime the Mishnah says chachamim omrim, the sages say, that's the majority opinion. What's the first opinion that the Mishnah gives? Rabbi Eliezer, who has a very vague opinion. Roger, I'm not saying the answer is wrong.
No, I'm just guessing.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like it's not satisfying my itch of a question.
Well, isn't the giving of the tithe or the truma to the Kohanim a mitzvah in itself?
100%.
So then I think it's done in such a manner that it would encourage somebody to donate that tithe to the Kohanim, and then they link it to when they go in to say they have their meal, so they link another mitzvah, the mitzvah of saying Shema, to that particular mitzvah of Truma.
But how are you connecting the saying?
I understand that they're. Yeah,
sorry.
so it's okay.
No, how do you connect this with when you lie down and when you rise up? Because we were supposed to say it when we lie down and when we rise up. And how does this one, when they eat truma, the Kohanim eat truma, how does that connect to the other part of it? One seems much more delineated. I mean, you might go to bed at the same time every day or get up, but there's some, I don't know. I don't see how the two.
So the three opinions, Linda, are essentially answering that question. When is the time? Okay. When is this time that we say b'shoch becha? Right? Because the Torah doesn't tell us. It says when you lie down.
When you lie down.
Right? So that's the question. What time is that? So Rabbi Eliezer says, I have the answer to the time. The time is when the Kohanim eat their truma.
Okay.
So my question is, thank you for your opinion. What does that have anything to do with saying the Shema?
Mm-hmm.
Like, not only is it not an answer because you're not telling me the exact time, even if you say, The Kohanim ate the truma once they were ritually pure after nightfall. They didn't have to eat it the second after nightfall. So it's not answering my question. Because I already know I have to say the Shema in the night. And the Kohanim ate the truma once they were ritually pure at night. Okay, so it's still nighttime. It's not answering the question from when exactly can we say the Shema?
Anytime during the night.
Right, but I already knew that going in, right? And so and the first question of is me'ematai, from when?
Well, new day, like after midnight.
I don't think it matters.
When?
A minute after midnight.
No, yeah.
And that's a Kohen telling us.
That's a Kohen. And I'm commanding.
Eli, what time did you have dinner tonight?
What time? At 6:30, let's say.
Okay, so we can say Shema from 6:30.
Perfect. Okay, we have the answer.
Okay, so the truth is that I don't have the answer, and the Gemara, which we'll take a look at next week, goes into this, right? But I'll sort of put out an idea as to why I think Rabbi Eliezer linked the gift of Truma, the mitzvah of Truma, to the Shema. So what did we gloss over? We glossed over this. They must be ritually pure in order to eat it. Right? If they were tameh, they're not allowed
to eat
from the truma.
Interesting.
To me, that was a connection. We're talking about the Shema. We're talking about the foundational Jewish belief that we declare Hashem is one. What's the ultimate state that we want to achieve to make that declaration?
Ritually pure. You want to feel
ritual purity. That is, always the blessing that precedes the Shema and the first word right after the Shema focuses on love. Right? Habocher et amo Yisrael be'ahava, and then we say the Shema. I think love helps us get there, but get where? To a state of purity. That we enter into that statement and ultimately our faith in a state of purity.
But that time is still fluid. The time is
still fluid. It doesn't answer the time. We'll see if the Amoraim from the Gemara have an idea as to what Rabbi Eliezer was talking about. But it's been 75 minutes. I don't want to keep people too long. I want to thank everyone for your insights, and I hope you got a taste of Talmud. That's the goal. A taste of what happens when you open a mishna and you take a look at a mitzvah and questions and debates, and where it really gets funky is when you start with the Gemara. And we just in terms of analytical thinking, the way that the rabbis tackle the questions and come at it from a whole different view. So we will continue that next week. I think yeah. Yeah, we're gonna take a look at Rashi's comments on this first Mishnah, and then we're going to jump into the Gemara. Sound good? Next Tuesday, same time, same Zoom station.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laila Tov, everyone.
Thank you, Laila Tov. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.